Let's hope that it's working. Hello, welcome to a Friday afternoon live stream. If we look different, if we sound different, it's because our capture card well and truly died. We looked like aliens when I plugged it in, pixelated aliens.
Okay, so it's lasted about 2 years, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good news, isn't it? So it
sounds working.
It's paid for itself.
Yeah.
In a way, so.
Sort of. So we're using a slightly different capture card, which is basically a very cheap one it's the one that I actually normally use to show the back of the camera. I use it about once a year. It was about 30 quid on Amazon. And anyway, so that's what we're using for now. I did try and use web transfer, what's it called?
Webcam utility.
That one. The
only problem is we couldn't hook up our mics, so that was a bit of an issue there with the Zoom setup, and it's also only does 720p and not 1080p. We will get a new capture card, and we also will try to create a 4K stream. I don't know if our bandwidth will allow, but we hope that we can try it in the future.
Exactly. John said, time for an upgrade. Kotick Timmy said, all working fine.
Is he talking about DSLR?
Bubba said, sound is tiny. I'm sorry if the sound is low. It's actually on the max. No, don't make it higher, because then we're going to clip, because it already is on.
Are we clipping there?
We're right on the level here. And I think if we push it anymore, it's going to be pushed too much.
Yeah. Well, look, if every one of you experiencing very low volume sound, then do let us know. But if it's just one person, then try to play with a slider, with your volume slider, and see what happens. But yeah, if everyone experiencing this, we will increase the audio here, and hopefully we won't clip.
There you go. No pressure or anything. Seth is in the chat today. Hi Seth.
I believe there was Vahography in there as well.
Yes, I think I saw Vahan. There we go.
AP Studio as well. So hello everyone.
Hello, and to all our regulars, thank you for joining us so more prompt than we were.
Yeah, thanks for bearing with us as well.
And also, if you can give us a like on the stream, that would be super helpful. I actually have some people that I need to thank for our coffee fund contributions last week. I haven't quite gotten around to the super thanks. Like, I haven't got a list for that yet.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, there's a super thank thing, and then apparently that's like a coffee fund thing, but after you watch the video. So if you found it useful, you can do that. Obviously, every little helps. We're trying to keep this channel sustainable. So there's a lot of things we want to buy as well. So, so every little thing is appreciated.
Yes, absolutely. So I have to say for the last few weeks, thank you to David Remley, Ian Willard, Robert Pike, and Tim Herring for your contributions to the Coffee Fund. That was through our PayPal Me link. Thank you
very, very much.
So very much. And of course, if you're contributing during the actual live stream, then I'll thank you as we go along. Today, we thought we would give the DSLRs some love.
I really like how you frame the camera, so you don't really see DSLRs
you can't
in
see
the frame.
them. To be honest,
shall we zoom out? Let's zoom
no,
out.
because then you get the top of my screen. Okay, fine. Do what you like. Actually,
Too late.
It's too late. I'm just going to try and not.
Is that good enough?
If we put them here, then that's sort of there. You go. You get my cup of tea in there as well that I made minutes before the show. Anyway, never mind. So the problem is the amount of space that we don't have on this desk.
Yeah, this is the tiniest desk in the world, really. So if you've seen Tiny Desk Concert, this is smaller than that.
Yeah, it is. So I brought just a small selection. I brought one of our faves, which is the D700. We're not going to specifically just talk about the D700 today. We will actually I think we could probably manage a live stream on the D700. What do you reckon?
I think a nice tribute or homage to this camera, because D700 for a lot of people was the one, because D3 obviously came out and we all had D3 moment, whatever that is, but D700 was the camera that a lot of people bought. So because obviously D3 was expensive and big and heavy and not for everyone. So, but I think it deserves its own stream.
Yes.
And we definitely should do one eventually.
Yes. For sure, because we did do one for the D800s.
Yeah.
We did. Well, I think we did the 800 series, didn't we? Which included the D850. That was the first live stream where I got you on as a guest spot. And look at you now.
Look at me now. You are stuck with me, people.
That's right. So yes, I also have of course, the D850, because I think we have agreed our opinions on this camera. And then just because I wanted to talk a little bit about my DSLR journey, I brought a little small one, which is the D3500 in this case. Now I have to say some thank yous so I don't miss them. Thank you so much to Adrian for your contribution. He said, after a tough start, you need a coffee. I certainly do, Adrian. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Michael George said, DSLRs have always ruled and their slaves have been the SLRs. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Mirrorless are what they all eat to keep them healthy. Right. Both sound groovy, baby. Thank you very much for your contribution, Michael. And then Terry said something towards your upgrade. Thank you very much, Terry.
Thank you.
David said coffee or capture card D70S forever.
D70S was good. It had a bigger screen compared to D70.
It did.
And you know why? It was so cool because, you know, when it was at the same time when the phones were coming out.
Yeah.
So getting a phone with a color screen and then getting a phone with a color screen, but a bigger screen, that was the thing, right?
It was always like, what's the next big screen? Ian, thank you very much for your contribution as well. And Fred and Jeremy.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you so much, all of you.
Yeah, thank you, Fred, for your comment under our Nikon report, because obviously it was all about financials. And a lot of people commented being very emotional about things while we were looking at the stats.
Yes.
You know, so I do appreciate your comment. I do, you know, I know it's not for everyone, the finances and all this, but I think they're important. So we do appreciate your comment.
It's not for me, but it is important. And also, yes, after sometimes we get, I think, sort of not negative comments, but, you know, sort of, as you say, emotional or not necessarily accurate or even correct information comments on our...
A lot of misinformation in our comments on the finances. Some people said, we're not going to name names, but some people say they're holding the money for the items they haven't supplied. Now, that's not true completely, because
that's not what they're reporting.
The profits are for the items that's been sold and shipped. So that's number one.
Yeah.
Another comment to address is people say, well, A1 is available everywhere. It's been best-selling camera. Where is Z9? There's a tiny production, etc. Now, Sony A1 is still out of stock in UK. I've checked with several dealers, the big ones. So that's first of all. Second of all, Sony A1 came out in March 2021. Z9 came out on Christmas 2021. So we technically can call it January, realistically speaking.
Yeah.
So even if A1 is still out of stock right now, well, it's been out for much longer. So Z9 is still out of stock. You can't compare.
Yeah, you can't compare those two because they've been a different runway. But this is not a talk about Z9.
Exactly.
Or the finances, for that matter.
Exactly. But I just want to address this.
Oh, no, I think it's important. I think it's important that you did, and I appreciate that you did. Jeremy said that he was late because work got in the way. But
we were late as well.
We were late too, so it's okay. And thank you so much, Seth, for your contribution to the Coffee Fund. Said community means supporting each other. It's very, very true.
I agree.
Thank you. We massively appreciate it.
Speaking of community, actually, Chris Tublue is back.
Yes,
so he started his own. It's not Chris Tublue anymore. It's Tublue channel. He's back with a new video. He seems to look like he is now back. Well, I won't say for eternity, but he is back. Have a look at his video. Obviously, for some of you who love his style of videos, and they're always funny with great cinematography, do check his channel out. Yeah, very creative, always a lot of fun to watch, and a lot of thought goes into them as well. Yeah. So they're an absolute riot. So we're very, very glad to have him back. Thank you also to Jeff and Charles for your contributions to the Coffee Fund. Now, Norm said, good day from Toronto, in Canada, for those who don't know, where DSLRs abound. I'll take a D500 and a D850 over the Zs any day. Do you call it Zs or Zs in Canada? That's the question. That's a good question. I bet because of, you know, USA is probably Z. Maybe because it's quite close, Yeah. But the Queen would make them say Z. In French. So, no, not in French. Anyway, so we obviously both started with SLRs in our own right. Yes, with the film SLRs, without the D first. And then eventually we went into digital. That's right. And a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about our stories.
So I think we both had D200s at different times.
Yes. Well, I didn't own D200. My college had them, and that's what I used for my college projects.
Yeah. Right. Whereas I learned digital photography, proper digital photography, on a D100, which was, the magazine that I was working for, all the photographers were using D200s at that time. And they were like, oh, yeah, you can use this one, the D100, because it was no longer loved by them and it wasn't their main camera. And it was quite different, actually, because it had the top dial. Do you remember the top dial on the left-hand side, yes, which changed everything? You had to change from your aperture and shutter priority modes up there.
Not good.
It was quite complicated, but I managed it. And then I think I picked up, my mum picked up for me a secondhand D200 here. And the rest is history, really.
That's true. That's true. Mine was D300, I think S, if I'm not mistaken. And then I had D700 for a trip to China. And after I came back, I've just upgraded straight away to D700. So that was my thing. But D200, I used it at school for 2 years. Incredible camera. The images, especially like, as long as you don't push it at like over, not even 800, like 640 ISO, they're beautiful. Especially like, studio shots, 100 pro photography, amazing.
Yeah.
And then, the CCD sensor, I don't know what they do with the color science, etc., with the reproduction, but it does, I would say, it does give magic to the image by reducing dynamic range effectively at the cost of dynamic range, but and noise. But overall, those images are fantastic, and I do prefer a good I do like a good CCD sensor.
Yes, there's a kind of magic to them for sure. Norm says that in Canada they say Z.
Oh, okay.
But that Nikon Marketing's trying to get them to say Z.
No.
So there we go. No.
We support you.
Yeah, exactly. We support this motion. And Austin said the D700 and D4S still have a magical image output. It's very, very true. So it's kind of funny because I had the D200, D300, which I wasn't so keen on for whatever reason. I didn't fall in love with that camera. Although I was looking through my archives this morning and I took a lot of pictures on the D300. It got a lot of use, that camera. And then I couldn't quite afford a D700. And I actually went, and there's a reason why I brought this little camera with me, is because once you know how to shoot full manual on any camera, you can even shoot fully manual on one of these little things.
So you went for the sensor, effectively.
So I went for the sensor, and I had a D50-100. At the time, that was better than the D300.
Because you like the flippy screen?
I loved the flippy screen. No, I liked the fact that it was smaller and lighter. I had taken the D300 out to various kids' birthday parties and stuff like that. Yeah. And it always got a bit of a double take, sort of like, wow, that's a bit of a beast of a camera.
You see, the thing with the D50-100, you won't be able to hang it on the screen like Seth was doing in his live streams. I really enjoyed that, Seth. Your rough handling Z9 and people literally losing their minds. That was awesome. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, so I wouldn't recommend you do that with the 5000 series camera.
Z9 is really good. It is really good, I agree.
Yeah.
I think you should do whatever you want with your camera because it's your camera and it's a professional tool. Totally agree with Seth on this one.
Yeah, you do what you like with your stuff. It's like no one can get upset.
You spend your money.
See, someone is going to probably complain that I picked this lens up like this. These lenses are plastic, and so you shouldn't really pick them up.
That's fine. As long as you have a lens hood on it, you're fine.
Yeah.
Which you don't have right now. So people will comment on that.
But I love the size of these little cameras. And actually, if you know how to use manual, if you know how to use your full manual mode, your aperture, your shutter speeds, your ISO, it's not that difficult to do that on this camera. It is a bit annoying that there aren't as many. If you look at the layout, this is actually a D3500, so it's not exactly a D5000, but similar concept. It's very, very minimalist on the back. Very few buttons. Look at that compared to something like that. And you can see why a lot of people will start with something small and light and fluffy like this one.
But any day I would prefer this.
I know, but I realized that I could do some very similar things. The only thing that frustrated me about the D50-100 and any of these smaller cameras actually, is the fact that there's two things actually. The first one is that there's no autofocus motor. So if you've got AFD lenses,
yeah, that's true.
And I had a combination of the two at the time, they were manual focus. Wasn't the end of the world because I had a lot of manual focus lenses anyway, but that was a bit frustrating. The other thing was that there was no option for non-CPU lens data. So
that's true as well.
I couldn't tell the camera what aperture I was shooting at with my manual focus lenses. There is a third thing, which didn't bother me so much, but on some of these entry-level cameras, you're actually missing the ability for the pop-up flash to trigger remote flashes.
Yeah.
Didn't use it very often. Usually had like an onboard commander or something.
Yeah, so commander mode effectively. Yeah, that was absent on this camera.
That's right. So with the 5100, I actually think it did have it, but then later iterations, they took it out.
Yeah, and then it was just a 7000 series. It would start with 7000 and up. But yeah, you're right. Some of 5000s would have that, early ones, and then the later ones, they would take them off. I don't know why. But, for me, once you try D200 and you get used to this beautiful grip, which just feels nice, the buttons are in the right place, the dials, everything, then it's very difficult to come back. The reason why I kind of stuck with 300, 700, 800, and 850, and never 750 or 780, is because of the controls and the grip as well. For me, 750, I know a lot of people love it, but for me, 750 felt like a toy. Shots fired, but compared to something like D800 series camera or D700, just because of the build quality and just overall design.
But you like a chunky camera, not like a pro level huge camera, but you like a big solid metal camera.
And that's why I want Z8 and not Z7 Mark III. I want it in this form factor, not Z7 form factor or Z6.
So that kind of begs the argument of, but I thought mirrorless was supposed to be smaller and lighter, and that was the advantage.
If it's a Pro tool.
Yeah, don't think that's the case. If it's a Pro
tool, I don't want it to be small and light. I mean, I want it to be light. I don't want it to be small. I want to feel like, look, I don't have large hands. I mean, I'm not Donald Trump, but, but overall, I would say, you want to make sure that you have a nice grip when you're shooting.
Yes. So that's completely fair enough. I don't think I thanked Gene, so I have to say Gene.
Thank you, Gene.
Thank you so much for your contribution to the Coffee Fund. He's still using the D810. So there you go.
Beautiful
we've got a lot of DSLR users in the crowd, so I knew that this would be a nice sort of room. This is a safe space for everyone to talk about their Ds.
Thinking about D850, this sense is beautiful.
Yes, it is phenomenal.
So in terms of this, again, Z7 Mark II at 45 megapixels, it's the sensor, they're about the same. So if you got the 850, there's no reason, if you're shooting, let's say, studio photography or let's say non-sports photography, to upgrade to Z7 Mark III. You don't need Z9 because, again, the resolution is the same. Yeah,
and then I will argue a couple of things later on the Pro flagship bodies too in favor of the DSLRs. But George also said that D200 was his first digital camera. David is still using the D4S and D6 for college sports photography. And I will remind me to revisit that because I have some interesting tidbits on that.
There is a chap I follow on Instagram. He's a photographer for a certain football club, a small football club.
Yeah.
He's still shooting on D3 or D3S, and he publishes the images daily.
Yeah.
And that's talking about pros.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't need to go for the latest or greatest. They will stick to the proven horse. It does the job. It does give them output in terms of resolution, what they need to be. So I guess it's for the club's website and maybe some newspapers, etc. So you don't, for them, they don't see the reason to upgrade maybe in next, several years until the camera dies, and then eventually they will get the Z9 or something else.
Yeah.
But it's a purchase for 10 years or so.
That's right. It becomes an investment if you use it that way. Obviously, I do know people who sadly don't get as much use out of their cameras as maybe they could. And if you're going to buy a camera as a hobbyist and then use it once or twice a year, no, that's not an investment. But if you are actually even a semi-professional or a very keen amateur and you're going to get lots and lots of use out of that camera, then you can consider it investment, particularly if you make money out of it.
Yeah.
Apparently, Simon says in New Zealand they say Z2. So yay for the New Zealand pronunciation of that. Now, Roy points out that the big body professional Nikons are very tough. I would argue that actually most Nikons are quite tough. Obviously, some withstand things better than others. I I actually did, my D300 was dropped, not by me, but it was dropped and the camera survived to tell the tale. The lens did not, but it was a very cheap lens that I had on there. The little original 24-85G non-VR, which came into about 10 different pieces and then didn't survive to tell the tale.
Yeah, I agree with Fred. No politics in this chat unless it's Nikon versus Sony or Canon.
Yeah, exactly. Fred also used to work in Brentford. I didn't know that.
Ah.
There you go. Wasn't far from where I used to live, my old haunts. And then someone else was saying, so Ian said, loved my D3400 as well, but it part paid for my Z50, so it served me well. That's true. You can always use these earlier bodies to sort of part exchange and work your way up. And I would say that there's a point where technology didn't advance or change that much in recent years in terms of DSLRs. So unless the future user is specifically looking for like Bluetooth capability or something, or Wi-Fi, most of the cameras that we have now and that are available will hold their value reasonably well, because once we got to sort of around the 24 megapixel mark, not that much changed. Processor changed, yeah, but you could still take great photos in broad daylight. So, and Robert says, learnt manual on a D3200, still use it now.
And I still 100 megapixel full frame sensor.
Of course you do.
Even if I have to shoot at 200, 100 ISO only, I'll take it.
All the time.
By the way, because the chat is so lively today, so if you have any questions, just put QQQ.
Yes.
And then the question, because it's so easy to skip. Don't spam us asking the same question 3 times. I will answer that one. Is D5600 is good for fashion photography? Any camera is good for fashion photography. Your vision is more important for fashion photography than anything else. You can shoot fashion photography with point-and-shoot cameras, and they're examples of that. So, so it's more about you training your vision, you finding the right team, you booking the models, and, just creating a concept for the shoot more than anything else. Vaha asked, what is the best DSLR ever made, Bex?
D850, hands down.
Absolutely, and I agree, and it's the only one to have. Right now, if you're buying a brand new DSLR, this is the one, if, of course, budget allows, but it is ultimate DSLR.
It is. I would say as a next step down, if you can't afford, or like the D850 is a bit unobtainable for you, or the 45 megapixels actually slightly puts you off, because you are looking at, anything from 80 to 120 meg per picture, and that's a lot of information to have to deal with afterwards. Then actually the D750 and D780 are very, very similar. The D780 is one of those cameras that doesn't get talked about enough, but it has a hybrid autofocus system in live view. So it's actually the same as a Z6 basically in live view for autofocus, and it's a DSLR in every other respect. And
that's the only camera, isn't it?
And it's the only camera that does that. And I was actually really surprised that they didn't include that in the D6.
That's true.
Because the D780 came out right before the D6 and they didn't have that as an option.
That's true. And also, I prefer 780 over 750 just in terms of build and size as well. I think this is a true professional camera, while 750 was always for me as a kind of, again, my personal opinion, is the same professional. So
yes, yeah. And so the D780, if you want that sort of slightly more robust feel, is a good camera. It's still quite expensive though. So for a DSLR, if you're looking for a good sort of second-hand deal, I would say the D750 with 24 megapixels. Everything about it is great. The only downside I would say was the buffer size. The buffer was not super big. I did have a couple of events where my memory cards couldn't handle and it's not fast. It's like 4.5, 5 frames per second, something like that.
So basically, unless you're shooting lots of sequences at high frame rate, then maybe get a camera with a bigger buffer. But
yeah, so D780 is good in that instance.
But anything, just a single shot photography or short sequence, D750 is fantastic. The image quality is about the same as 780. Autofocus is, not far from it as well.
Yes. Now it's interesting because Roy said that the D850 is still a bit small unless you put a grip on it. And I think that's a very personal kind of thing.
Very subjective, I agree.
For me, the D850 is actually slightly too big. I prefer a slightly smaller camera. So the D750 and D780 for me were much more comfortable.
Yeah. For me, the optional grip is amazing, because for general photography, I would use it without the grip to take with me, etc. But if you on a studio shoot, you're doing a lot of vertical type shots, portrait type shots, the built-in grip is nice. You just attach it to the camera, it's there. As I say, I like the size of the camera by itself. I like to use grip, but not all the time. So that's why, let's say D6 or something like Z9, maybe a little bit too big for me. I would like to have something like this with a attachable grip.
Yeah, because you did have the grip for...
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I did. That's the thing.
Occasionally used it.
Any studio shoot, any portraiture, I would put the grip on. For anything else, I would just remove the grip.
There we go. Now, I'm going to pronounce this really wrong, and I'm sorry, but I think it's Rubade or Rubade, depending on whether you're however you want to pronounce it. But anyway, hello. Said, I own a D7200 and use it as a hobby/semi-pro, and I love it. Will buy a Z6 II, but the D7200 is still going strong after 7 years. And I like that comment because the D7200, although it's a DX camera with a 24 megapixel sensor, and the Z6 II obviously is a full frame mirrorless camera, also with the 24 megapixel sensor. If you are a hobbyist or if you're managing to accomplish what you need with your camera, then you're probably better off investing in lenses than upgrading the body. I would say that only when the camera kind of reaches its limits for you, where you go, oh, actually, this camera cannot do something that I specifically need for a particular type of shooting. For example, the Z6 II, what does it have over a DX camera? It has this bigger sensor. So if you, probably you're the wrong person.
I'm sorry, I thought you were going to say what it has over a Z6, and I had so many jokes about this.
No, I'm not going to compare it. But like
the second processor, that does nothing.
No, it's not true. Don't poke the bear. Yeah. So the D7200 has maybe a limited dynamic range, I would say, in comparison to a full frame camera. They've got the same resolution. So what that essentially means is that with the 7200, the pixels are denser. They're crammed into a smaller space. Arguably, that could mean that you could actually crop a little bit more with the D7200 and maintain that pixel density, if you like. But it does then affect your low light performance.
But once you go full frame, you'll never go back.
That's right.
I can tell you that.
But there is a look and a feel to full frame images that you just don't get anywhere else.
Yeah, so. I'm sure now we're going to have a chat discussing the depth of field and different sides of the sensors, but that's not the point.
No. Yes, exactly. We can have a whole discussion on that, and depth of field, and whether or not these things make any difference when you're shooting full frame or DX. There's lots of arguments around that, but we're just generally giving love to the DSLRs. So there you go. There's a couple of people mentioning, D500. Is it better than the D850 for bird photography? I think that's an interesting one.
It is an interesting one because effectively, once you crop the D850 sensor, I think what you get 24 megapixel resolution, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm sure people will correct me, but you get higher resolution DX crop if you need to.
Yeah.
So, but D500, I believe, should have a slightly bigger buffer.
Yes.
So.
However, I've heard from people that have both that the D500 autofocus performs better for birds in flight.
Well, that could be a reason as well.
Than the D850. So there you go. Gaming Sarav is from India and is also watching today. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you to Toro Porco for your contribution to the Coffee Fund, who says, after buying a Z6 in 2019 to finally retire my D200, I couldn't resist also buying a used D750 a few months afterwards. I can understand.
Yeah. I mean, the problem with D200s now is they're working, like most of them are working still fine. It's the finding the right memory card. So the low capacity memory
4
card
gig.
that work. I think 4 gig I think is the highest you can go on this one.
Yeah.
So you may want to just stroll on eBay and just buy a second-hand one because you can't get them new anymore.
Yes, it's true. Larry said, still love the color from my D810. And Richard also shoots with a D810 and a D7100 as a backup. It's interesting because the D7100 and the I think it was the 5100 were actually the only Toshiba sensors that Nikon used at the time. So they have this slightly, and it also didn't have the AA filter, I believe, in the 7100. So it produces a slightly different look, I feel, to the other D7000 series cameras. But I remember, do you remember Pablo?
Yes.
I wonder if...
Not Escobar.
No. We had a lovely colleague called Pablo who had the D7100 and swore by it, but he used to sort of compare, because he went very rapidly from a 7000 to a 7100 to a 7200, and he was always very kind of into the color science of it all.
Remember our colleague Louis, who still works here, who went from D5500 to D500?
It was a D3500.
D3500 to D500.
within a couple of weeks, I think.
And D3500 was his first camera. So
yeah.
Literally, his photography journey is about maybe a month and a half old, you know, and he's already on D500.
That's right. He just went straight for it, which is amazing. He got the bug.
I mean, to let you on the secret, we don't get paid here with money. We actually get the equipment instead. So that's what it is. Yeah.
Thank you very much to Keith, who said, please have some coffee. More liking needed. Friends. Yes, friends. There are 302 concurrent viewers and only 125 likes. So please like us.
All right. Yeah, just put us some thumbs up.
And thank you for joining us and being here this afternoon.
Yeah. And if you don't like it, put a dislike. It's fine. It's still promoting us on the internet.
Still works.
It's called engagement. So it's good.
Now, Divin said, hi, I'm a wedding photographer. I have a D850. Was thinking to trade in and get a Z7 II. What's your opinion? This is a good question.
You know my answer.
I know your answer. I have done a number of weddings, and I've actually yet to do... Have I done a wedding with the Zs? No, I don't think I have. But I've now used Zs for long enough that I would be comfortable with them. What I would say is, if you are planning to change over, don't make your first job using the camera in anger with an entirely new system, because there is a slight learning curve, particularly with the autofocus system between a DSLR and a Z.
Trial it.
Yeah, exactly. I would maybe loan one for a day, but ideally, if you are going to upgrade, spend a bit of time with the Z7 II before you then jump in and do a wedding. Saying that, I mean, I don't see any reason why the Z7 II would have any issues for weddings, but I personally would use a D850. Why would we use D850? You can probably, I know that you would too.
You know, I don't like change. So no, I would personally stick to D850 and I would wait for Z8. So if Z8 is effectively a D850, so high-res camera with all the Z9 goodies. So if that's the case, I would just wait for Z8 and hopefully it's not the wait is not long enough. So, you know, hopefully it's going to come out this year and you pre-order on the first minute of announcement. So, but... For me, I wouldn't shoot wedding with Z7 II or Z6. However, that's me. That's my personal opinion. However, we have Nick Harrison in the chat. I think he's still here.
Nick's here.
He shoots professionally with Z6 cameras and does a brilliant job with it. So they are professionals using the cameras. I know at least one event photographer who shot events with Z7 II, was absolutely fine. You know, so in terms of this, I would say, whoever you ask. If you ask me, I would say stick with D850. If you ask a professional photographer who shoots with Z cameras, they will tell you Z cameras are absolutely fine. So it's just my opinion is, if you just upgrade, you're not really upgrading the sensor. So in terms of this, I would rather wait for, let's say, if Z8 is a higher resolution sensor, then I would just upgrade to that. Just so you at least not just trading in one system to another, but actually without upgrading the sensor, you know?
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
That's fair enough. I mean, I've done events and concerts with the Z6 now quite happily and not had any issues with it. Yeah. I've retired from doing weddings for the time being, which is why I haven't had the opportunity to do it. But I think that if I was booked for a wedding, I would do that with the Z6.
Exactly. And just to kind of clarify, we express our own personal opinions.
Yeah.
So it's not like the shop opinions or anything. We're not trying to anger anyone. But we have our own experience with the cameras, and that's kind of opinion that we kind of, created out of the experience of using those cameras.
That's right. So. Like Kevin, for example, said weddings with the Z6 II is a great choice, but yes, practice before you do a wedding. So there you go. Bubba von Braun 1000% agrees with something, but I'm not sure what, but good, thank you. And thank you very much to Yaman, who's... Probably
someone wrote, Con is wrong.
And they said 1000%.
Agree with it.
He said 1000% agreed.
1000. Well, I can't be wrong.
I have to say thank you to Yaman. Thank you to Yaman for the contribution to the coffee fund.
Thank you so much.
He said, if it's true that you guys get paid in gear con, then here's a bribe for a job application at Gray's.
Haven't you seen my eBay account? No, I'm just kidding.
It's very silly. It's not true. Now, Russell did ask a question. I'm trying to keep an eye on the questions, but I probably have missed a couple. Okay, there we go. What would be a good DSLR to live on a 200 to 400 for bird and wildlife? Can the 3000, 5000, 7000 bodies handle a lens like that? Or should I look at the other bodies, the 3-number bodies? Well,
sorry, I missed the camera models.
3,000,
5,000, 7,000.
Yes, okay. So the 3,000, 5,000, 7,000 series cameras, they are smaller. Obviously, the lens would sit on a tripod, so the actual balance is not the biggest worry. The main issue is that the 3,000 and 5,000 series cameras specifically don't actually have the fastest autofocus acquisition. It's considerably slow. Yep. Of the 7,000 bodies, the 7,500 is the fastest autofocus system in a DX body aside from the D500. So that would be my choice.
I also want to add that the build quality of 3,000 and 5,000 series cameras are not on par with 7,000 cameras. 7,000 is considered to be semi-pro.
Yeah.
While 5,000, 3,000 are entry level. So therefore, you probably will put, like, I would worry about the mount of the camera. So if the lens is always on a tripod and then you put the camera on it, that's fine. If you're trying to kind of handle both handheld, I would just worry about the mount a little bit because they're a little bit more plasticky compared to the D7000 series.
That's right. Just scrolling back here so I didn't miss any questions. Jet Photo said, I would have a hard time shooting DSLRs after pushing ISO so high in mirrorless cameras. What's the max you would push ISO on a D850? I mean, I shot concerts in the Royal Opera House with D750 at 10,000. And those were used shots. They were shots that were used for their promotion and stuff. D850, I think the highest I'd pushed it comfortably was about 6,400.
Yeah, I would say the same. Everyone has, though, different levels of tolerance for noise.
That's right.
So in terms of this, when, let's say, I was shooting as a backup for the second photographer, with another photographer, he told me that he doesn't want me to push the camera higher than 3200 ISO. So, you know, in terms of this, everyone is different. And again, if you shoot in fine art, you probably will shoot at the lowest ISO possible. So I think it's 64 on D850, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And then I know people who go, oh, yeah, I shoot at 20,000 all the time because then I just apply a bit of noise reduction and actually it's for newspapers, then it doesn't need to be crystal clear.
Paparazzis, that's a good example. For them, the importance of just getting the shot is more important than the image quality itself. So they would go really, really high.
Exactly, because they're definitely not the idea behind those newspaper shots. Glossy magazines is a bit different because you do need a slightly better print, I'd say. But for newspapers specifically and for online, newspaper publications, they're not going to be zooming in or cropping at 100%.
Well, that's the thing. They effectively, anyway, they're not large images on the web pages because, so you effectively can make the image smaller and also you apply noise reduction, then you shrink them and you apply sharpening on top of it. So a lot of it will get rid of a lot of visible noise. While if you print in big, that will become more apparent.
That's right. Ed said he'd love to work at Grace. So, Ed, when you decide to move to the UK from Mexico, just come.
We are hiring.
Ray said, hi from South Australia. Hello, Ray.
Hello.
Can you test the 200 f2 on a Z9 at some stage? If we can get our hands on a 200 f2, I don't mind doing that test.
Haven't seen one in a while. No?
Haven't seen one in a while, but it is a beautiful lens, I have to say.
At some point, I was considering it for portrait photography.
That's just something. But then, I mean, they all have their magical qualities. Hands down, my favorite portrait lens is actually the 105 1.4e. I love that lens, but I know that some people prefer 135. The 200 f2 is just too big and heavy for me, but it's magic
but
lens.
But bokeh on 200 f2 is amazing. It's just stunning. Magical.
Yeah, we should try and get our hands on one. Maybe there's one lurking in like MPS somewhere that we can borrow. So Scott said, how is the Z glass versus DSLR glass? Oh, that's a tough one.
I have an answer, but the thing is, if you look at the stats, and if you compare the images side by side, Z glass will outperform DSLR glass.
Yeah.
Now, depending on your style of photography, and for uneducated viewer, so basically for anyone who doesn't pixel peep or doesn't do photography, they won't see any difference whatsoever.
Yes. If you kind of know what you're talking about and you do like to zoom in at 100% and compare your images side by side, some of the Z lenses outperform their F-mount equivalents. Some of the Z-mount lenses outperform the better F-mount equivalents. For example, let's take the 1.8 primes. Their 1.8 Z primes, a lot of them outperform the F-mount 1.4 primes. It's a kind of case-by-case thing. It's not one for one. But But one of the biggest reasons, I think back when we were talking about when the Z system is kind of being introduced and we were talking about why it's so great, the glass is actually one of the bigger reasons for changing over, I would say, because those lenses are something else, but they're so sharp. And that's kind of the problem, is they don't, I mean, the only lens that I really love for its character is the 51.2 because it's a very characterful lens. I also really like those little pancakes, the 28 and more specifically the 40.
They're fun lenses.
Yeah, but there's something a little bit different about what they create. I don't necessarily like a lens that's just going to be, everything looks perfect and I didn't even have to try.
Because of that, I actually enjoyed using wide lens lens.
Yeah.
Because it was full manual, and it made me think a little bit more creatively, because you have this challenge and then it makes you approach things a little bit differently, so that's nothing. And also, speaking of f-glass, I'm still holding on to my H5 1.4G.
Right.
I haven't upgraded to H5 1.8. I'm going to wait for the 1.2 version to come out eventually, and hopefully at that point have enough money to get that.
Yeah, we'd really like to see that lens.
Yeah, but 1.4G H5 is beautiful lens. Again, I had 105, I had to let it go 1.4, which is beautiful lens. It's just, for me, H5 was the focal distance I prefer, and I think 135 would be a better combination for me, so kind of H5 with the 135.
Okay, so we need an 85 1.2 and a 135 f4 Z lens.
Definitely. That's what I want. 105, I love it, but again, if you got H5, probably there's no need for 105. So you kind of need to make a decision which one you prefer.
There you go. Abhinav said, can you give your thoughts about the Z5? And a couple of people did answer. Kevin said, loves the Z5 and shot a wedding with it successfully. Timothy said the autofocus was bad. I think that's possibly a relative term, because I used the Z5. I did a review on it probably a year and a bit ago, and I didn't have any problem with the autofocus. It's not the same as the Z6, it's not quite as snappy, but it's still
very close. Yeah.
But I think the thing is that the Z5 is almost more accurately marketed over in the USA. In the UK, it doesn't get marketed quite the right way, but it is essentially your entry level point to full frame cameras in the Z system. So that's it's good for that and what it's for.
And for people watching who are not in the chat, do keep an eye on the chat, because a lot of questions being answered in chat, so they're really helpful. We have such a nice community watching us there, so we help each other. But as well, if you're afraid of chat, don't be afraid. Just say hello.
Exactly. You can always say hello. It's very busy today, so trying to keep an eye on the questions.
I love that. We have a lively chat. Obviously,
so many.
This topic resonates with a lot of people.
It does. See, it wasn't a bad idea after all.
You should send it to the marketing. It's like we should postpone the discontinuation of everything.
Yeah.
No, it's a shame. It's a shame that a lot of F-mount stuff has been discontinued at the moment.
It is true. Yeah. It is a shame. But I think someone was saying earlier, and I can't find the comment now, but they were saying, don't sell your DSLRs. You're going to regret it in a few years' time. I have to agree that
just like your old film camera.
Yeah, exactly. If the pattern is anything to go by, but I think it's worth having a DSLR if you can afford to keep one, because sometimes one has to sell a camera in order to buy the next camera. In my case, so I couldn't keep my D850, but if I could have kept my D850, then great.
The same. Unfortunately, I had to let my D850 go.
Yeah,
and myself in the process. It's a fantastic camera.
Yeah,
it is an amazing camera. What we do right now requires us to be kind of on the trend, so to try different new things. So sometimes some equipment that we love have to go.
Yeah. Now, a huge thank you to Randall for your contribution to the Coffee Fund. That's amazing.
Thank you very much,
Randall. I almost bought the D850, but chose another ZFC because of the price. That's a big price difference. Because of the price, size, and weight. And also because all my lenses are mirrorless, except for 2 f-mount lenses that are f2.8. Now, I'm pretty sure that if you had gone for a D850, those f2.8 lenses would have worked beautifully on it. But I understand if you're kind of committed to the Z system, then it makes sense that that's the way you're going. But yeah, it's definitely a nice one to have if you can afford it.
And ZFC is a nice camera, and we had that obviously excitement when it first came out.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, it's a retro camera, but us using this camera again and again, I start to appreciate it more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I still love my little Z50 as well, but there is something nice about having those retro controls.
Yeah, it was popular to say that now that the camera has soul. I would say ZFC has a soul.
Yeah.
And Z50 has a half of a soul.
It does have a soul.
No, it's a nice little camera, and obviously, if you're not into vintage aesthetics, then Z50 basically is ZFC without the charging while you're shooting thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I know. It's that's quite a helpful thing actually to have, and we take that for granted.
The battery is quite small on those cameras, so charging while you're shooting is good.
It's very helpful. There was one thing that I think it was John Hughes was saying earlier. If you do end up going for a Z system, you do need to have batteries. You have to have spare batteries because they are quite energy hungry. I also found that with my D850 when I first got it. It used to drain the batteries like crazy. But
so there was something wrong with your D850 because I never had issues. No, honestly, 1,000 frames easily with D850 on one battery.
You know what I think it was? Because I bought my D850 secondhand, but the battery that it came with was not the latest type. So I was using first version like 15s.
And you may have wireless setup as well.
Yeah, I also did that. I also turned it off, but yeah.
Yeah, mine was always in airplane mode.
I like the fact that Lukey said I was searching how rich is Genghis Khan and got here. So great. Fantastic. Welcome to the group. Yeah. So a few people are saying, I started with a D80. In fact, Ray said I learned with a D80 and then 8518 and the results were excellent. Also, the beauty of those DX cameras, and one of the things that I liked about having a 5100 for a little while was that I could use all my full frame, like I could buy full frame lenses in advance of going full frame. Because then after that, I went for the D700, then I went for a D750, and then I waited a very long time before I went for the D850. So that was my progress.
I want to come back to the previous comment about different lenses.
Yeah.
I think the importance is, especially like if you got that camera now and you're upgrading your f-glass, just do some test shots, because some f-mount lenses have nicer rendering, in my opinion, than Z-glass. It doesn't mean that one lens is sharper than that. Like Z is going to be sharper. But when you take the shot and you look at it, and there's something that you just feel like, this one looks better.
Yeah.
So always have a look, compare the images, because clinical sharpness is not necessarily for me at least, the quality I would, look to when I'm buying the lens. For me, rendering is more important. So, do those tests. So, maybe one is not sharp, like 5814G. Yeah.
Yes.
That one has a very special rendering. It's not exactly the sharpest lens in the world. So I wouldn't compare it with 51.8, which S lens, Z lens, which going to be arguably better on tests. If you put the diagrams and all the MTF, MFT charts, whatever they call it, it would win. But when you compare the shots and the hands of right photographer, you would see that 58 is just fantastic lens. It has its own special place and you can line up.
It definitely does. And there are certain lenses that I think are quite special in that 1.4 lineup. In fact, I think all of the 1.4, the Pro f-mount 1.4 lenses are quite special. Some more so than others. I was never a huge fan personally of the 24-14, but I really liked the 28-14.
28-14 is amazing. I mean, I wish I would have one. And that's when we talk about, okay, you switch to Zs, and I just feel ashamed that this is 105-14E, 28-14E. They're there and they're beautiful, but they were released so late in DSLR lifespan, would say, that they kind of not really appreciated, because when they came out, I think the Z was already on the horizon. So a lot of people didn't want to spend £2,000 or £3,000 for the lens that they would feel like they would need to upgrade in the future. So
yeah, but I would say to you, if you are a DSLR user and you want some really top-notch glass, look for the 28-1.4E. It's a beautiful lens. The 105-1.4E for portraiture, amazing. I had the 35-14G. I loved that lens. I do regret not that I don't still have it. Worked amazingly on my f6 as well, which was helpful.
And again, like there's a Sigma Art 1.4, which is a really nice lens.
It's true.
And it's, according to many reviews, is sharper than the Nikon G glass.
Yeah, but I didn't care about that.
Exactly. I actually, because I have the Art lens and you have the G. When I compared, I did like Nikon more.
Yeah, just the look.
Just didn't have the money. Because I think the Art lens cost me about $450 or something.
That's right.
Nikon glass would be about $1,000.
It was over $1,000. Keith has a QQQ said, how much longer do you think Nikon will continue to make DSLRs? I mean, we don't have any sort of secret insider info. I think that the D850, the D6, the D780 are going to stick around for a bit longer.
Yeah.
I don't know about the smaller bodies, to be honest.
And I'm
bodies.
worried about D6. I think that's going to be probably the first to go because of Z9.
Sure. But here's my point. I know a number of professional sports photographers who, when the Z9 was announced, they came and said, right, get me a D6 as soon as possible. Not because the price was suddenly going to crash, because it wasn't, but more because they knew, based on what they'd seen, whether it was putting the Z9 in their hands or because they'd been using D4s or D5s or whatever, the D6 is kind of the pinnacle of that flagship DSLR technology. There is nothing faster than it for autofocus, really. And as a DSLR user, it's just more comfortable to go for that than invest in a Z9 and change your system entirely
for this type of photography.
Yeah, for that type of photography. I mean, there are probably a couple of people here who have used both, who've used the D6 and maybe put their hands on a Z9. And I know that for wildlife photographers, for example, that animal recognition is completely mind-blowing in that it changes the way that you take pictures if you go for a Z9. But the D6 can do so much of it already that it's like, well, why would I change my whole system? Yeah. I can rely on this camera.
Okay, but if you would walk into the shop right now and we have both in stock, let's say, imagine this world. I know you can't imagine this. I can't imagine it. But imagine you walk into the store and there's Z9 available to purchase in a store.
Yeah.
And there's a D6. Would you buy Z9 or D6?
Well, probably the Z9 because it's £1,000 cheaper.
Well, I think based on technology as well.
Sure. If you're a Z user, then you would. But if you were a DSLR user, would you? I don't know.
I think if you're looking at the future proofing, then if you would just buy a camera for next 10 years, you would buy a Z9.
Sure, so you'd go Z9 and FTZ
because
you haven't got any glass to go with it. It's true.
I would get FTZ.
That's what I'm
adapter,
saying. You'd have to get the FTZ too.
Maybe a few of them, so just attach them to the lens permanently.
Yeah.
Not to swap them around. But, but it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one. I think that Z9 still wins here. So, I do love D6. Like they say on American televisions, I love you, but I hate you. So, like D6
Do they say that?
D6 I watched some trash TV recently.
Okay.
And I can tell you, they say like, she's my friend and I love her.
But I hate her.
But hey ho, yeah. So the thing about this is D6 is a great camera, I think, for the money.
Yeah.
Z9 makes a lot more sense. And in terms of technology they implemented and the firmware upgrades they released, it makes more sense. And even if you got to have glass now, just get FTZ adapters. They're cheap enough to buy several.
Yes. So, Keith, I don't know if we answered your question, but I hope we did. Tortoro Porco said, when I bought my used D750, Nikon kindly replaced the shutter under the recall program, so it should last a long time to come, which is very good. And thank you very much to Ride Along with Randy, who said couple of cups of Joe for you both. I noticed you've got yours. I think Andy was asking what you had in your cup.
Okay, it's Colombian.
It smells
cold
good.
brew. So that was 8 hours in the fridge.
And
last night.
Wow, that's dedicated.
Not cold brew. You fill it up with cold water, and you let it in the fridge to sit for about 8 hours, and you take it out.
Is that what I had yesterday?
Yeah.
Oh, it was very nice. So another very important question from David said, unrelated to DSLR, Con, have you tried Costa Rican black honey coffee?
No, I haven't tried that yet. It's on my list.
Okay.
Definitely.
Right, let me just check if I've got any
I love
more.
South American coffee in general.
Yeah,
my
so
jam.
do I. So do I.
I love them all. That's the thing. As long as they're nice and fruity, I like the fruits in my coffee.
There you go.
Lots of bright taste. Don't like the nuts. So.
No, I know, and then I have the opposite because I put milk in my coffee, so then I have to have the nutty taste.
Medium dark, just a little bit. Medium light is fine. Not dark roasts. Dark roasts are very easy to basically make a charcoal out of it. So kind of, maybe medium dark is the top I would go.
There you go. Now back to the subject of cameras. Dave said, just got an advert from Nikon. They're selling refurbed D5s for $1,999. So $2,000. That's a bargain.
That's a bargain.
That is an absolute bargain.
Their camera was what, £5,500?
Yeah,
when it first came out?
Yeah, 5.5, I think. And Michael Reed said, what happened to the mythical D550/580? Well, it's a little bit like the D300. We waited for nearly 8 years for the D400, and then we got a D500 instead. I don't think that there will be a D550 or 580 personally. I think the D500 is it.
All right. Well, if you remove emotions from this and look at the sales stats, we will know the reason why Nikon didn't release update for G500. Well, they're really vocal and dedicated enthusiasts who really need this camera. It is still a small niche if you're looking at the volume of sales. That's what it is. Again, what I'm saying right now, just remove emotions from it and just look at the stats. That's all it is.
You care about the stats. It's true, and it's important.
It sucks.
Yeah.
But that's just the way big companies now look at those things. Everything's by the numbers.
There you go. Yeah, it's true. Well, that's how they make and evaluate their sort of business plans.
Yeah,
it's how they make decisions. So yes, it is tough, but there we go.
But I do hope that we're going to get that version of this, a Z90 or Z70, whatever you're going to call it. Like I think it makes sense.
Yes. I think that there is definitely a place for it. Back to DSLRs, that Nelson said that I still have my D7000 I used from 2011 to 2020. Still a great camera, even if old. Indeed. Very true. Nothing wrong with those earlier sensors. The D7000 was quite innovative at its time. It was 16 megapixels, and we hadn't seen a bump up in megapixel technology at that point. So it was like, ooh, fancy. And it was the first camera that they put the autofocus modes all in a button down here because we were busy looking for it and couldn't work out how to change our autofocus modes.
Trust me, I found myself a lot of times that I accidentally switched from a single server to a continuous server or manual.
Yeah.
And I would try to take the shot and the camera wouldn't focus, so it would adjust the focusing. So I would have to check it basically rigorously. And that button, while it felt a little bit unintuitive when the first camera was introduced, then it kind of became a second nature. It's actually a much better design solution.
Yes, it's true. It's good to have it all in one place. In fact, I on my Z6 now have it all dedicated to the functioned one button down the bottom, so that it's kind of a similar thing. You can change all your focus modes with your eye to the viewfinder.
You know what annoys me in mirrorless cameras? That you can't lock the focusing point. There's no this little switch lever that you can move.
Nope, I know.
For us, single point, center focusing
point
users, exactly.
It's so easy just to return it to the middle though with the OK button.
No, but
I know it's not the same.
Obviously, I have my touch screen, turned off, so I don't press it with my nose or anything like this. But still, it's a bit annoying sometimes.
There you go. Richard said there's a lot of Z talk for a live stream about DSLRs, so stop talking about Z cameras.
We can't pretend that Z cameras don't exist.
No, we've actually given a lot of love to them so far. Yaman said, I love the look of the 135 f2D. That's the defocus control lens. Works beautifully on the D700 specifically. Yeah. He said it has a special place in my gear collection. It gives the best vintage dreamy look ever. I think that is, that is the lens for that sort of thing.
I agree. It's one of the lenses that is kind of the product of its time. It's got this beautiful rendering. The only problem is once you switch it to D800 series and higher resolution cameras, the focusing is not as precise. So you can't really shoot at f2 wide open.
No.
Or at least get, let's say you won't get 10 out of 10 all sharp, at f2. So you really have to stop it down. But the rendering is fantastic. We compared it with the 135 Sigma as well. And I would say both lenses have place to exist, I would say.
Yeah, it's true. It's tough to compare a much more modern Sigma 135 with a lens which was originally designed for film cameras. But both produce beautiful images. That video is on our YouTube channel if you're interested. Blizz R says, I think my 51.2 AI lens has its own soul. The pictures it produces are really lovely. I have that same lens and I totally agree. And I loved putting it on the D850 actually. That was
which one?
The 51.2 AI.
Oh yeah.
It's nice. Incredible.
True.
Ride along with Randy wants a D5. Well, there you go. So Nikon are selling refurbed ones. Off you trot.
$2,000 is not bad.
Thank you very much also to Dave for your contribution to the Coffee Fund. Said a tenner to celebrate actually catching you live for the first time, which is amazing. Thank you for making it. So Roy said that his daughter swiped his D5, so he's glad that he still has the D850.
Remember that story? I think it wasn't D5, but it was like D4 or something. This chap bought D4, went to Brixton, got jumped by two guys, and he fought them off with his camera.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
crazy stuff. Yeah,
brilliant.
But they are built well enough that you can smug someone.
Yes, they are.
I mean, I'm sure you can't get away with murder, but you can definitely damage someone.
Now, here's the funny thing. So Simon said, no love for Canon DSLRs. The thing is that, Simon, we're a Nikon-only store, so we don't actually have much of an opinion on Canon cameras.
I mean, they do nice printers, though. Yeah. I've got one.
We actually, no, mine's an Epson. But we actually just do nothing else except for Nikon. So it's not really our forte. So we can't talk too much about Canon DSLRs. But DSLRs are great. Just in general, we love them.
I have experience with Canon 5D Mark II.
Oh, yeah?
D700 and 5D Mark II.
I remember you had one.
Yeah, 12 megapixels versus 20 or 21 megapixel.
Right.
I took it on holiday to Mallorca, I think, or somewhere there. So.
Nice.
And the images were noisy at 400 ISO.
Really?
And I looked at them and I was like, you can zoom in a lot more. That's nice. You can print. But D700 is better.
So that was, so at that point, putting more megapixels into a sensor, but without then having a processor to back that up and remove the noise when creating the image, that makes a big difference.
And you know that I like my megapixels.
You do.
I like a lot of them cramped in a tiny sensor. So, but that's a really tiny experience we had with Canon. We would love to talk Canon, but we just don't have any opinion about it. The same applies to Sony.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, it's true.
Unless it's PlayStation.
We can talk about those. So that is our singular experience with this Canon, and I didn't actually get a chance to.
And they're all good and great. Whatever you use Fuji, you use Sony, you use Canon, that's absolutely fine. They're all fantastic cameras. As long as you enjoy using them and as long as you enjoy using them, doesn't matter what you bought, how much you spend, what lenses you have,
That's right. So just to kind of round up, for anyone who is looking at moving from their existing DSLR to maybe a top range DSLR. So at the top, we've got the D6 and the D850. The D850, in our very humble opinion, is the best DSLR ever made. But I would say even now, if you pick up a beautiful low actuation D700 or a D750, bearing in mind that, yes, you cannot get them serviced easily. Now, there aren't parts available, so you have to sort of treat them quite well and hope that nothing goes wrong. But if you can pick up one, they're such lovely cameras.
Beautifully made.
Really, really well made. In fact, the one that I bought secondhand. And by the time I sold it, it had over 200,000 actuations on it because it had been a pro camera before I bought it, and it became my go-to sort of wedding camera afterwards.
I want to say that's a lot of pictures of flowers, but...
it wasn't. No, it was events and weddings, but thanks. Okay. Leave my flower photography alone. There is a market for that.
It became new 24 to 120 and Z50.
But saying that, if you've got one of the smaller bodies, whether it's a D7000, 5000 or 3000 series, you can do a lot of the things that you can do with bigger cameras, depending on your type of photography. If you know how to just master your manual aperture, your manual... What am I trying to say? Your aperture, your shutter speed, and your ISO manually.
The exposure triangle.
That one, exactly. If you know how to use that, then you can actually use any of these bodies. It's all translatable. With the smaller bodies, you just have to dive into the menus a bit more for different bits and pieces.
Exactly. I would say train your eye. Doesn't matter what you use. Train your eye.
Yeah.
Try different compositions. Just take different shots. Practice. As long as your eye is trained, you can take beautiful shots with any equipment.
Yes, exactly. And the beauty of all of the DSLRs from the 7000 series up is that they will use the full range of AF, whether it's D or non-D, but autofocus lenses, AFS lenses, the newer types. So some of the DX bodies are accepted, but all the full frame bodies will use the AFP-E type lenses, so the ones with the electromagnetic diaphragm. And of course, you can mount your manual focus AI and AIS lenses on there as well, or a pre-AI if it's converted. I know a few people who use pre-AI lenses on their DSLRs, but I've seen that little bit of plastic there break, and I just wouldn't do it personally. It's just a little bit too much of a risk. But you've got so much choice of glass. You've got decades of lenses.
Indeed.
So I think that's one of the beautiful things. Yaman said the D700 is a tank, feels heavier than any other body I own, and it takes beautiful pictures. So there you go. I think we handled all the questions.
Fred is asking, D850 refurbished on sale for $2K. Would you buy one? What's D850 in US new price? 2.5?
It's probably 2.5 because it's 2.5.
I would buy brand new.
Buy a brand new one for 2.5.
For 2.5, yeah, $500. I would just spend a little bit extra. I don't have good experience with refurbs, personally.
It depends actually. No, I had my Z6 was a refurb. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I've never had any issues.
Yeah, I had the lemon once, and that's it.
That was it, and you couldn't do it anymore.
No, I think 90% of all my stuff I own is secondhand. So
yes.
Not a refurb, but secondhand. So I don't mind that. But I think for $500 difference, if it's $500 difference, it could be more. If it's $1,000 difference, then get a refurb, especially if it has a warranty.
Yeah, exactly. The Nikon refurb stuff always has a warranty, so there you go. Simon's on board now. He goes, oh, I get it now. I wondered why you were talking about Nikon so much. There you go. It's I know, and everyone was jumping on him like, why Canon? Why are you mentioning this in our chat?
Everyone is welcome.
All welcome.
Whichever brand you use, everyone is welcome here. Absolutely no problem.
We're just a bunch of Nikon fan nerds,
exactly,
basically.
That's all. But we're not. There's no like console wars or like brand wars or anything like this.
Exactly, we don't have that here.
Exactly.
On a final note before we leave, because we have been talking for a full hour and 4 minutes.
Wow.
I know.
Okay. We've been late as well. So
we were late, so you're getting an extra 5 minutes out of us because of our capture card problems. It doesn't matter which body you end up with, obviously, as long as you use it. I had professional portrait photographers shooting with D70s. My wedding photographer shot with a D70 actually at the time. It was
I remember the bar mitzvah guy who shot on what, D80?
That's right.
Something like 300,000 shots.
D70s and D80s at 300,000 shots, and then would just buy another secondhand one.
You wouldn't touch it without gloves if you would see that camera.
Yeah.
I mean, but it paid for itself.
And it was used at so many events, hundreds of events throughout the year.
And I think he bought literally a secondhand one, the same camera. I think it was D80 or D90, I don't remember now, but he literally bought the same camera secondhand. He said, it's going to last me another 10 years.
Yeah. There you go. So it doesn't matter what you've got. Just use it. That's what we like. We like to see people taking pictures. And exactly. that's everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's
Go get yourself a DSLR.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. Please feel free to give the like button a little like. It just helps the channel very, very much. We will be back next week with our Nikon report. We've got a video coming out on the weekend, a little review video for you. Yeah. You're
going to spoil it or?
No.
Okay.
And
it's not Z800mm, no.
No, it's not yet. And then next week we're going to have a slightly different live stream. So watch this space, and we hope that you all have a wonderful weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will see you next week.
See you next week. Bye.